From Social Prosperity Partners, this is Community Catalysts.
Being educated, learned, and applying those to the work is a value that can get you very far. When you have these moments that you can't predict, but that overwhelm your community in ways that you never really could have foreseen, being someone of a high emotional IQ or being able to truly empathize became the most important attribute that one could have as an elected official.
Welcome to Community Catalysts. I'm your host, Matt Lehrman. This podcast is for everyone engaged in the hard work of local leadership. Each conversation is a chance to learn from those serving their communities, whether you're in a city, county, or school board role, or simply care about how your community is led. My hope is that you'll find something here that helps you lead with greater clarity, stronger connection, and a renewed sense of purpose. Today's episode is part of a monthly series sponsored by RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government. RELI connects regional leaders across Northern Virginia to take on complex challenges together. By sponsoring this series, RELI is sharing those insights with local leaders everywhere, and we are very grateful for their partnership. Our guest today is Christian Dorsey, former chairman of the Arlington County Board and former board chair of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. He served on the Arlington County Board from 2016 to 2023 and has also worked at the regional level with jurisdictions across the Washington metropolitan area. Arlington, Virginia sits just across the river from Washington, D.C., in one of the most complex and highly interconnected regions in the country. Local leadership there means continually working across boundaries, balancing competing priorities, and staying responsive to a wide range of community expectations. I'm looking forward to exploring what it takes to lead in that kind of an environment, and what local leaders everywhere can learn as they navigate growing complexity in their own communities. Christian Dorsey, it's a pleasure to meet you, and welcome to Community Catalysts.
Oh, likewise, Matt, and I look forward to our conversation.
I'm thrilled to talk to you. So, Christian, I understand first off that you have a background in economic policy and nonprofit leadership. Can I ask you just to tell us about your path to public service?
Well, it's a circuitous and long path, but I'll try to make it short for you, Matt. I moved to the Washington metro area to attend undergraduate school at Georgetown University, and then the uncreative sort that I just went across the river from the university and settled in Arlington, Virginia. And even though I went to the School of Foreign Service at Georgetown, I kind of had an epiphany through school and refocused my efforts from international affairs to really thinking about all the things that activated me domestically. And, that began a career getting involved in issues like community development and prejudice reduction and working with young people to equip them to, sort of tackle our leading issues. And, that naturally leads to public service. You sort of get involved in nonprofit work and you kind of become an activist and you kind of become someone who wants to agitate to change the world a bit. And while I didn't necessarily have any designs on getting involved in public service right away, it just sort of became a natural outgrowth of a lot of the work that I was doing and the people that I was meeting. And one group that I met with pretty early on in my professional career were a bunch of folks in Arlington who really wanted to significantly change the way our county dealt with social issues. And, curiously enough, while these were very experienced and well-regarded people in the community who had lots of great ideas, none of them really wanted to do anything about it. And, impetuous person that I was said, look, one of you should run for office if you have all of these great ideas. And, after a while, they said, well, we're not going to do it. How about you? And, I was this very young at the time person who said, look, if it's going to mean that we stop talking about these issues and can actually do something, sure, I'll do it. And I had a very quixotic run for public office when I was, I think at that point in my early 30s, and lost, but lost closely. And so that sort of connected me as someone who people thought might be a future prospect for public office. And eventually, when the time was right in my life, I ran again and was elected and had the honor of serving the community. But it was a peripatetic, long path that had a lot of fits and starts.
Christian, I'm really interested in this. I talk with a lot of local leaders who have a similar story where they said, they were just minding their own business and the thought popped up that, someone should do something about that. And then it dawned on them that they were the ones who should do something about it. Was there a specific instance that comes to mind, some particular moment where that actually dawned on you?
I do. I remember it well. So this group, a group of folks that people in Arlington will know very well, people like Jack Kornman and Todd Endo and Charlie and Laura Rinker. Those names may not mean anything to the broader community, but in Arlington, these were highly respected, well-known people who were known for their progressive politics, who were known for their incredible, thoughtful approach to policy, but were also known as people who were kind of outside of the political system. And I kind of engaged in this group, again, several decades, their junior, and it was sort of like a regular salon where we would get together and talk about issues. And I found it incredibly beneficial, learning from their wisdom and experience. And in turn, it seemed that my being oriented towards action was something that was very beneficial to them. And to be quite frank, during one of these conversations, we're sitting around and we're talking, and we have a pretty clear idea of how we should think about it from a policy perspective. And to me, there was a very clear way that you could actually do something about it. And that meant getting elected and being a part of the community's leadership on this. But none of them were willing to do it. And at that moment, I was thinking, I don't need to be a part of this group anymore because talking about this stuff is really not productive for me. It's not a good use of my time. And so I was ready to sort of separate myself until I said that would be a silly thing to do if I'm not willing to do what I'm asking them to do. And so I became the person who ran to try and see that those issues could come to the forefront.
That's one of those, if it is to be, it is up to me kind of moments.
Indeed, it really was. And, I certainly didn't know that when I went into this particular evening meeting, but walking out of it, it was sort of like, okay, I think I'm going to do this. It's time to put up or shut up. If I'm going to be the young, brash person of the group, I actually have to walk the walk.
I'm really interested in this. Do you think in retrospect that those people who you were talking about, who I assume were older than you, do you think that maybe in their minds, they were thinking that part of the work that we're doing here is activating the next generation of leadership in our community?
That's an interesting question. As I reflect on it, I doubt it was their active thought. All of my life, I kind of gravitated towards and been comfortable around people many years my senior. Probably has a lot to do with my upbringing, where I spent a lot of time with septuagenarian and octogenarian relatives, and it was very comfortable in that setting. And so being the lone person who was in his 30s interacting with these people in their 50s and 60s was not weird to me, but I was the only one. So I think it was just a case of serendipity more than anything else that I was a part of their group. But you raise an important perspective. I think having me run for office with a lot of the values and ideals that they brought to the table became very much something that I think, gave them energy, gave them purpose, and gave them a new direction to sort of think about their work, because they really were outside of the periphery of politics, of party stuff and elections. And through me, I think it gave them a chance to actually get out of the ivory tower of policy development and thought and actually see what it could do in terms of real life action.
So you're saying it wasn't strategic on their part to set you on this path, but it was certainly validating to them that you did.
Yeah, I think it was like a mutually fulfilling accident is what I would describe it.
I love that. So your first run for office, you said, did not win.
Did not win.
You ran for office again, and you started serving on the council. We just said that in 2016. You got elected in 2015, right?
That's right. That's right.
So let's fast forward to that. Tell me something about the learning curve of when you finally got elected. What was it like to step into that? And this is still a part-time position, right? It's not a full-time job. Is that right?
It's one of those weird things. When I was elected in 2015, it was, as was the case throughout the Commonwealth of Virginia, the sort of county boards were constructed like they were when it was more of an agrarian economy through Virginia, and people sort of did their legislature work while also being a part of the community broadly. Of course, by the time I get elected in 2015, we're talking about Arlington County, one of the most densely populated counties in the country, the smallest self-governing county in the country, the heart of the national capital region. It's a big time place that has big time issues and concerns that require full time and attention. So yeah, sort of the pay scale was structured as if we were part time, but the work was fairly all consuming and really difficult to manage while also holding a career.
So tell me about that learning curve. What were the things that you could only learn on the job?
So here's the arrogance of someone who came in, with a deep policy background, working in the DC area for decades, living in the Arlington community for, 25 years or so, almost 25 years before I got elected. There was certainly a comfort that I had that I could be ready from day one and just walk into the job and start performing at a high level. In reality, no one is prepared to serve until they're actually on the job and doing the work. Everything from just understanding the vast bureaucracy that I was now in charge of setting the governance for in conjunction with my colleagues, getting to know that, the issues, the leaders, the stresses, the pressures, the interconnected relationships that they had with other jurisdictions in the federal government. I didn't really have a full sense of any of that. And that's all on the job training. And, we sort of have this local metaphor that we talk about, drinking from a fire hose. And it feels that way at times. But I also felt like my professional career up until that point allowed me to sort of handle that. And so while there was a steep learning curve, I never felt overwhelmed by it.
Christian, I wonder if I could zoom into one experience in particular when you were on the Arlington County Board. You were leading in Arlington when Amazon selected the region for its HQ2 project.
Yeah.
And that was a moment with national attention and very real local impact. I imagine that flew at a lot of those different altitudes as well.
Sure did.
Can you kind of walk us through that experience? And I don't want to ask you the whole thing in one big question, but get us into that. What was that experience like when it first even dawned on the county, when it became real as a thing to be pursued?
Well, Matt, you're taking me back, but sort of, I'll make this quick, I promise. When Amazon sort of did something which was untraditional at the time, they issued this sort of very public call for communities to woo it. And, they outlined the high level things that they were looking for in a community to relocate or to locate their second headquarters. And when I read that sort of open solicitation that just went out through the media that everybody else read, probably like a couple of hundred other jurisdictions in the United States, I looked at it and said, well, that's us. And so, I talked to our economic development director and said, this is on your radar screen, right? And he said, of course, absolutely. And that began this incredible journey where I took that conversation in Arlington, and then, while many of my regional colleagues were also doing the same thing in their communities, sort of began to figure out, okay, well, what's going to be the approach here? And we worked on multiple levels to develop a response from Arlington, but also to position the region to attract it. If not Arlington, certainly the national capital region somewhere would also be beneficial. Anyway, you go through this long, intense process where you put out a lot of information, you do a lot of internal brainstorming about your community's assets and your potential to handle all this. You send it all off and you hear nothing for a long time. But there's lots of rumors. There's lots of, sort of speculation. And then eventually it's kind of trickles down to you in these very secret, unofficial ways that you're kind of a finalist. You're on the short list. That then begets its own process of submitting more information and having all kinds of back and forth with Amazon, and eventually they make a decision. Initially, it was not just Arlington, Virginia. It was also Arlington, Virginia, and New York City. I don't know if you'll recall that. And eventually, they reconsidered separating their second headquarters into two places and really focused on Arlington. When that all just shook out, it was surreal because all of a sudden, Arlington was getting international attention. All of a sudden, folks who, while we were always very much engaged in conversations with our local media, the Washington Post and everything like that, getting the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, and even international outlets who were, wanting to know about our community was intense. Fortunately, I think we were well prepared all along the way, so nothing really threw us. But I guess we're developing a theme with this conversation. You kind of go in with one set of expectations, and then reality is 100 times more.
Yeah, the intensity has got to be great. But the way you tell that story, it sounds like, they put out a request for qualifications, you responded to it, and then just waited, and the ball was in their court. I'm really curious, from a local leadership level, did you also have work to do to kind of seed the ground, to make the population of Arlington want to welcome this to the community? Because it was going to be a pretty big transformation for what that was going to mean if it was going to happen. What did that leadership look like?
Oh, okay. So after we got the word that Amazon had selected Arlington, one of the things I'm most proud of, and I had an opportunity to very much influence, was our community engagement with it. And, we decided that we were going to do what we had never really done as a community before and have extensive and numerous conversations with the community using all the public engagement channels that we could think of. And we were going to address the issues substantively. Here's going to be the actual sort of construction timeline and development. Here's what we expect will be the impact on surrounding neighborhoods. Here's the fiscal impact here, everything that we can think of. And here's the impact on housing and transportation. And so we developed a lot of, policy papers. We did a lot of analysis that we had done all throughout the process. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't like we did all of this once we got selected. We had done this work beforehand to make sure we were truly interested in it. While we were certainly convinced that this was a good opportunity, we also knew that it would be irresponsible for us as elected officials to just say, trust us in our infinite wisdom. We believed that we needed to show our work and actually engage with the community because we wanted this to be a sort of community decision. I will say, I don't want to overly dramatize it. Most of the people that we met with in our community were very much looking at this as an opportunity that would benefit Arlington for a lot of different reasons that people had. But I would say it was pretty clear all along that the strong majority of the community was interested in this, but the portion of the community that was not was really intensely against Amazon.
No
Really
surprise
intensely.
there.
Really intense. So, that was the kind of thing where for everything that you put out, there would be questions about it. And once you sort of showed your work, they would then just say, well, we hate Amazon. And, it was an interesting process to sort of navigate trying to, articulate all the reasons why we thought that this could make our community better, how we were working to protect ourselves from possible harms that could come from this large scale kind of corporate development that's going to bring a lot of high price workers into a community. We had felt like we had done as well as we possibly could to insulate ourselves from that. And we also felt really proud that we were able to develop an incentive program for Amazon that wasn't like communities typically did. Usually, folks just threw a lot of cash at these companies to relocate there. We decided that we were going to do something different. And we pitched them on the whole idea. If your development and investment does what you think it will increase visits to our community and it will increase our hotel tax. And if that happens, we're willing to share an increment of that with you. But if it doesn't, then no money. And, to the surprise of many, Amazon agreed. And, people talked about the deal as in Europe and said, what a model for how you do incentive development with corporations. You create this opportunity for a win-win. Long way of saying, we felt really good about what we were asking the community to endorse. And in the end, the vast majority, I think, agreed. But nonetheless, we still had a multi-day, at least 8-hour public hearing on Amazon because everyone who had issues with, billionaires, with Amazon as a company, with corporate investment, all came out to express their opinions. And, I had the pleasure of presiding over that hearing. And it was, if I ever write a book, it's going to certainly feature in a chapter.
And what would the title of that chapter be?
Wow. It's got to have chaos in there somehow because we had a few moments of chaos, but at the end, I felt just extremely proud of what our community had done. I just thought that the thoughtfulness by which we responded to the solicitation, it wasn't desperate. We maintained what we felt was important about our community. We certainly protected ourselves fiscally. We did the best that we could to indemnify ourselves against harm. And we were uncompromising with Amazon about, how we wanted them to embrace our community as opposed to our embracing them. And so I felt really proud of the work. So it was an extremely chaotic moment, but one of the most gratifying experiences of my life.
Christian, Arlington securing Amazon's HQ2 was a huge, it was a nationally significant economic development accomplishment and a community transformative kind of thing. I want to ask you a question. I hope this is not a gotcha kind of question, but it's an earnest question based on how you tell the story. When I asked you about the local work that needed to be done, you started the story with after Amazon picked Arlington. And I'm wondering if there was if there was a strategic decision to not do local work with residents and local businesses in Arlington before submitting the application? Was there a concern that activating populations might be detrimental to the application? Am I reading too much into this? And really the only local work was done after the decision was made?
So there was some work that was done during the process of our sort of responding to the solicitation because it becomes known everywhere that you've responded to it. So there were some community meetings that took place, but I do remember intentionally not really committing to full scale engagement during that period because, we might not get selected. So let's not get too excited here. We don't know very much. But to your initial point, though, Matt, there wasn't time. The initial request for people to respond did not allow for full socialization within a community of whether or not we should even respond to it. And quite frankly, even if it was, I'm not sure that would have been the best way for me as a public servant or my colleagues to go about it. I think leadership does require at some point that you put your community in a position to succeed. And if you didn't respond to that, you would have been foreclosing the possibility that this could have been a good thing for you. I don't even know under what basis I would have determined that the community has, understands this well enough to give us a yes or no on responding to it. So, for me, having the chance to consider it after Amazon had selected us was the only practical way of doing it based on timeline and just based on the whole unprecedented nature of the way they went about trying to select the second headquarters.
Is one of the lessons out of this that as local leaders, when you see an opportunity, you pursue it? And community engagement, while always important, sometimes has to come later in the process.
It is. And that's something that it's taken me sort of a while to sort of fix as a fundamental governing philosophy and all of that. But engagement is not just this principle. A lot of people talk about community engagement as this thing that you just do. And, my opinion, when you do it, how you do it, and the integrity that you bring to it all matters. It's not just a matter of talking to people for the sake of talking. It's a matter of making sure you're able to give them the information that they need in order to give you their full consideration and their full opinion, and to do so at a time when they're not able to do that for you is really not fair to your constituents. And so, I care about community engagement a lot. I care about it, doing it professionally with integrity and with purpose. And, I think the Amazon experience really helped me sort of refine that a little bit because, when we did engage with the community, I felt so grateful that when they were able to say, what about this? We had answers. We had perspectives. When they said, are you prepared to deal with this possibility, that we were able to give them considered thinking on it. And so all too often, one of the things that I see public officials do poorly is think that, I'll just talk to people and, that'll suffice. But, go to the next level. Think about when you talk to them and how you talk to them, and making sure that you're doing so in a way that's going to leave them empowered as opposed to being dispirited.
I'm scribbling a note here as we're talking. I'm trying to capture the essence of what your lesson is here. Tell me if this gets at it.
Sure.
It's kind of this two-part thing. It's first, opportunity doesn't wait. But the second would be community engagement informs opportunity. That is, the opportunity didn't happen before the engagement happened. The engagement was happening. You had to build those relationships, build the familiarity, the relationships, the trust, so that when the opportunity exists, you can act on it. And then you still go back and do even more engagement after the fact. So it's not one or the other. It's a circle between the two.
You're totally getting the point. And you said it very much better than I did. So thank you.
I am a professional summarizer. That's what I do. So let's talk a little bit more deeply about this relationship between leaders and the people that they serve. If you were going to give me Christian Dorsey's, top 2 or 3 lessons about how to stay meaningfully connected to the community, what would rise to the top of that list?
I think first is to actually stay connected to the community. And, this is not some sort of circular logic, but it means doing things as simple on the local level as going to your grocery store, riding your community's public transportation, going to events, even if you're not on the agenda as a public official to speak, or even when you are on the agenda as a public official to speak, not just showing up for your speaking time and then leaving, staying and enjoying things, going out to your kids' events and engaging with people there. So one, staying connected to the community and not looking at your position as a public servant as one that gives you license to avoid those occasions or to run from them for fear of how you're going to be accosted by people. You just got to embrace that. Being a part of the community means truly being a part of it. Two, I think it's the natural extension of that is constantly test your assumptions. It's kind of really easy in leadership to keep your own counsel or to keep the counsel of a relative few and not really go out and test what you think with others. And so I frequently would engage with our community, not when I had fully figured things out or I had a fully baked plan to deliver them, but to sort of invite them to hear what I was thinking, hear some of the perspectives that I already formed, but let them know areas where I felt like it was only half baked and could use some group thought. Those became just really great moments for me in sort of developing my capacity of knowing that I was, not just doing a good job using the skills that I may have had as an analytical thinker or as a leader, but also testing them with the people who I was ostensibly trying to benefit and support. So I would say if those would be my two big lessons.
We're approaching the end, and I'm trying to put all of these ideas together into one question, and this might be too big for a single question. I've spoken with a lot of leaders in Northern Virginia, and one of the things that I've come to understand is that being in the capital region, there is an incredible amount of overlap and implications between transportation systems and regional funding and economic development and all these things. They definitely overlap each other. And Northern Virginia is this huge economic engine for the Commonwealth of Virginia. And so I understand all of this is going on. Recently, a lot of leaders in Northern Virginia have told me that the changes in the federal government's policies on staffing for the federal government and on support for communities around the Capitol feel like attacks on the communities where so many federal workers live. And I'm putting this into the same lens as COVID and George Floyd's murder and trying to understand, has something fundamental shifted in that for a long time, even if we felt that the federal government was ineffective or even wasteful, that at least we thought it was good-hearted in its intentions to be of service and to do good. And has something shifted through all of these where now we are sensing that the federal government is an opponent, is actually working against the best interests of our communities? Have I put too much into that question to ask you to reflect on it?
No, I'm happy to reflect. And, it's a terrific question because when I began service as an elected official, one of the big things that we were working on was trying to coax more money out of the federal government to support the Metro rail system that is the essential transit hub to move federal workers from place to place throughout our region. And, that was the sort of high-minded policy argument negotiation that you think of traditionally when it comes to the federal government. And over the years, what we've seen is something quite distressing, whereas the work of the federal government has been devalued, in my opinion, and the people who do that work dehumanized. And they're viewed as pawns within larger political agendas, regardless of not only, let's yes, it's devastating to communities in Northern Virginia to have government shutdowns where people don't have the ability to pay their rent or to buy groceries in the community. And that has a huge effect on those communities. Has a real significant impact on those people. And those sort of get lost in this larger conversation as people think about shrinking the federal workforce or relocating the federal workforce as if, it's just simply a matter of changing the letterhead, moving an agency from Virginia to Alabama as opposed to displacing a family. So that's something that is very much weighing on my mind, how the region known as sort of intensely a part of the federal government's workforce, people have lost sight of what that actually means. And I get disgusted that our national capital region has almost become the setting for this really warped reality show that gets defined by, whose name is on a building or what statues are in front of the White House. And, I sort of cut my teeth on the whole idea of this area being the hub for not only federal service, but for innovation. And, I kind of go back to John F. Kennedy's words. He said at one point, I'm going to paraphrase, more than any other city, more than any other place, the national capital region ought to reflect the best living environment that America can build. And I sort of believe that. And I think the people who work in this community believe that collectively. And to see that devalued disgusts me.
Christian Dorsey, it's been great talking to you. And I thank you so much for being open to this conversation.
Well, Matt, you are a great conversationalist. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
My thanks again to Christian Dorsey, former chairman of the Arlington County Board and former board chair of the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments. Listening to Christian, what stays with me is how interconnected leadership has become. The decisions local leaders make are shaped by forces well beyond their communities, and in turn, those decisions carry consequences far beyond them. That reality calls for a different kind of leadership, less about control and more about navigation, moving through complexity without losing clarity or purpose. Navigation asks something different of leaders, not just decisiveness, but awareness, not just direction, but judgment. The ability to read a changing environment, adjust in real time, and move forward in a way others can understand and support. What's visible in Northern Virginia isn't unique. Communities everywhere are more interconnected and more influenced by forces beyond their borders. Local leadership is still grounded in personal connection, but it now also requires the ability to think and act across all those layers at once. And again, my thanks to RELI, the Regional Elected Leaders Initiative at George Mason University's Schar School of Policy and Government, for sponsoring this episode. Hey, if this conversation sparked an idea, raised a question, or stirred something in your own leadership journey, I'd love to hear from you. Call me at 602-688-2724 and leave a message, ask a question, share a reflection, or suggest a topic you'd like to hear explored more deeply. I listen to every message, and your input genuinely helps shape future episodes. If you'd be open to sharing some of the hard-earned lessons from your own leadership journey, I invite you to apply to be a guest. You'll find the podcast guest link in the show notes. Your story may help another leader see their own work more clearly as they serve their community. And if you care about strengthening civic life through better conversations, I invite you to subscribe to my Substack column, Democracy Runs on Dialogue. You'll find the link in the show notes, and I look forward to welcoming you to the dialogue there. Community Catalysts is edited by Nick, Living the Dream Tantillo. I'm Matt Lehrman of Social Prosperity Partners. Thanks for listening. We'll be back soon with another Community Catalyst.